I just had Adam Scott on the show. And we talked a little bit about Blade, the movie Blade, comic book Blade.
Yeah.
And then I was reminded by my producers, were you in Blade?
I was in. Oh, I wish I was in Blade. The first two movies are fantastic. I am in Blade Trinity, which is no. Here's what I'll say about Blade Trinity. If you watch, and by the way, I'm friends with the writer-director, and he agrees with me on this. If you just sit and watch Blade Trinity, it's a D-. It just doesn't work. But if you know what they went through to get that movie made, it is an A+. The fact that movie exists puts it above Citizen Kane.
Three Films and a Podcast has no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode. All film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders and is used solely with the intent of film criticism, commentary, and education under fair use law. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to Three Films and a Podcast. We've got Tyler up in Portland.
That's right, here I am.
And we've got Ben Lawhorn up in Salt Lake City.
Hello.
And I'm down here in Pleasant Grove, Utah. And tonight we have a very fun episode for you. And I'm going to try to explain, maybe make up an origin story on how we came to trilogies. But essentially we had a watch party, and then we had a second watch party, which we called the sequel watch party, where we watched sequels, which was a ton of fun. And that watch party actually turned into like sort of a trilogy watch party organically, because we didn't stop at the sequel. We continued and watched the third one. And then I think Ben had the idea, why don't we, for our next round, each pick a trilogy that we cover on an episode? And so Tyler, Ben, and I opened up the Trilogy Encyclopedia and went through page by page to find the right trilogies to cover. And I was lucky enough to find Blade Unclaimed. For those of you who don't know what Blade or who Blade is,
shame on you.
We're gonna rewind back to 1998. And while you and your mom were watching How Stella Got Her Groove Back, Ben, Tyler, and I vicariously were in the theater with the people watching Blade.
I was actually watching Armageddon, and I was also watching the Utah Jazz lose to the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
Tough year for Tyler.
That's right.
Yeah.
Although we did get Armageddon out of it.
That's true. We did get that. I do want to say that I think the trilogies is an equally good and horrible idea on my part, because I was like, that means we're watching like 9 movies for 3 episodes. Like, I'm looking past the trilogies and we just have to watch one movie for 1 episode. I was like, that's going to be a cakewalk. This is great.
It'll be
watch 3 movies just to talk about
a load
it
up for sure.
But I'm excited. I love what we picked. I was super stoked that you picked Blade. It's been something that had been on my, super long list of things to watch. So I'm glad we got to it.
Absolutely. I'm especially now, like what you said, after we know what watching all these trilogies entails, I'm really glad I didn't force us to watch Lord of the Rings. I was going to. I was like, had it set in my mind. I was like, we're watching Lord of the Rings. It's my favorite, arguably my favorite movie besides The Big Lebowski. And I love all 3 of them equally. Well, that's maybe not true, but
I thought about the same thing, because I don't remember it like you guys. So I was like, it's probably good for me to rewatch it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, luckily I think we all went, all 9 of these are brand new to all of us. Is that right?
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah. Which I'm super excited about. It's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was cool to find, some trilogies. The thing is, there aren't very many trilogies that no one knows a lot about. Most, if a movie got 3 movies, most people have seen, a few of them, or at least one of them. So it was fun to find 3 unique trilogies that we hadn't seen. Blade, just a brief background of the movie and the character, is a Marvel Comics superhero, a day-walking vampire. In this movie is played by Wesley Snipes, directed by Stephen Norrington, and really is a product of its time. But I'm gonna kick over to Ben just to give us a brief, I guess, history of superhero movies up to that point and where Blade fits into all of that.
For sure. Yeah, in my super brief research for my brief breakdown of superhero movies, I mean, there were movies done back like in the 30s and 40s. Like there's like a Batman movie from 1943. There's Superman from 48. So, I mean, they did this stuff back then. But I think what I consider the first real superhero movie ever was the Richard Donner's Superman from 1978. I think that's kind of something that everyone kind of ties in with, just like that was the beginning of the superhero movement. I mean, it's a great movie. We got quite a few out of that. Yeah, we have like, is it 2 or 3 that has Richard Pryor? I don't remember exactly.
3,
but
I think, has Richard Pryor.
He put these laser beams out of his eyes onto everything. Bzzz, red hot laser beam. Dried up everything, just like that. I'm talking about dried it up like the machines that they have in the men's rooms. You know what I'm talking about? The hot air comes out and you put your hands under there and you dry them off. Sometimes they don't work, right?
So I think that was one of the first successful superhero movies. The next one that I think about goes to the Tim Burton Batmans. So we kind of like jump a decade. And I think it makes sense that, you know, the first 2 real superhero movies are arguably 2 of the biggest superheroes of all time, you know, Superman and Batman. And that just led into more, you know, if you want to mess with the phrasing of a superhero versus comic book movie, but we got a lot of stuff like, you know, you got the Ninja Turtles, you got Toxic Avenger, you got even Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Like there's a lot of comic books that got adapted. But I think for me, after the Batmans, the next thing I really think about, jumping another decade to the end of the 90s, is Blade starts. We get the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. We get the X-Men trilogy. We get leading in then to the Dark Knight trilogy. So I think for the beginning, DC really kind of had their hands like in the superhero genre other than the X-Men, you know, and Spider-Man, but Marvel kind of sold those off, you know, so Marvel Studios could still exist. So those are Fox and Sony properties at that point. And then I think one of the biggest franchises of all time, most successful franchises ever, starts with Iron Man in 2008, I believe. Is that right? I think it's 2008.
Yeah. Yep.
And that created what I would say is the most successful franchise in film history. 23 movies, just, you know, billions of dollars, and Marvel just kind of built it with kind of just the scraps that they had left over in Iron Man and Hulk and Thor and Captain America, which sounds weird to say now for, you know, how much money they brought in. But at the time, like they had to sell off Spider-Man and X-Men and Fantastic Four just so they could stay afloat. And then they turned it into what it is now, now having gotten Spider-Man back. So that's like a super brief run from, you know, 78 to now of like what I feel the main superhero movies were of those times.
Yeah. What's crazy is that up until Blade, the earliest Marvel property that had been depicted on the big screen was Howard the Duck with the help of Lucasfilm, which was in the late 80s. And so it almost went like a decade without a single Marvel character like in theaters, which is like insane now. And kind of like you mentioned, like the biggest IP that Marvel has is Spider-Man and X-Men. Like, I don't think people realize that the Avengers and like those characters didn't sell the bulk of comic books for Marvel, like for a long stretch of time. Like it's all Spider-Man and X-Men. So what they were able to do was like pretty incredible. And Blade, like I'd have to go back and look, but I'm not sure if Blade even had his own comic book. Like, I think he's just a character in someone's comic book.
Yeah. I don't know that he had his own run at all, but yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you said it perfectly. Just they had to sell off the most popular stuff just to keep their doors open, so to speak. I remember when they announced Iron Man, and I was just kind of like, why would they start with him? Like, he's just not a superhero. Like, he's one you've heard of maybe, but like, he's not someone that you know, Tony Stark, like, you know, Peter Parker or anything. Yeah. It seemed like such a weird thing to kick it off with, but man, I'm sure glad they did.
Yeah, and it introduced arguably my worst take ever. The thing I was most wrong about, I was talking to a friend of the podcast, Adam Palcher, which, you know, we can plug his pod, the Well, hell, what the hell's the name?
Deep Dive Film School.
That's right. I always know it as a damn movie podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, Deep Dive Film School. I remember he and I were talking about Iron Man when it was being made, and how it was going to be Robert Downey Jr. And at the time, I frankly didn't know much about him, and for some reason, I just thought he sucked. I don't know where I got that from, and so I was just like. I was like, Robert Downey Jr., that's going to be terrible. Like, that guy sucks. And Paul
You got it from Lord Michaels.
I'll never forget the look he gave me. Like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. And he was, like, super cool to me, So it's along one of the many times I've disappointed Paulcher in my movie takes. But, that's why we're doing this podcast. And that's why I've always enjoyed the work that he does with his pod. So if anyone listening to this, you like movies, check them out. They're awesome.
Yeah, and shout out Paulcher. He was gracious enough to help us as we were starting this thing, kind of giving us the info that he had from starting his pod. So, highly suggest Deep Dive Film School.
For sure. And we've talked about this too, and I want to mention it again just because I'll never be able to get over it. But just by the fact of them selling off those IPs and then having to create a universe around some of their lesser known stuff completely flipped, like, the comic book hierarchy, you know what I mean? Because I know for a fact, like, kids that I see in my life, like little kids, they like Iron Man and Captain America, a little bit of Thor, some Hulk, you know what I mean? It's not like Batman and Spider-Man don't have the stranglehold that they used to. And in fact, like, I wonder if some kids think of Spider-Man as almost like a secondary character because he came so late into the movies. And so it's just interesting how it all played out, the short game, really affected the long game in a way that's like, kind of surprising and strange to us who grew up with Superman and Batman and Spider-Man being like the unapproachable top three, and now that's not the case at all.
Yeah, now every household knows who Groot is.
I am Groot.
For sure.
Who would have thought that in 2000?
No,
it's nuts.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's the only comic book movie my mom likes is the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's awesome.
That's awesome. Well, and honestly, like, people today, if you're introduced into the superhero genre today, just by the way Marvel and I'd even say Christopher Nolan, the way Christopher Nolan and Marvel have reinvented that genre, like, it's actually tough to go back in time and watch some of the earlier attempts at the genre without just accepting it for what it is.
Right.
And so that brings me to my next question, which I'm going to pose on Tyler, is rewinding back to 1998, what exactly was Blade trying to be?
Oh, Matthew, that's a great question. And honestly, I think I talked about it in my Letterboxd reviews quite a bit. I honestly don't think they really know. Like, I'm trying to, like, it came out a little bit before The Matrix, and I don't have enough scope or memory to remember like what the landscape was like. But I mean, we talked about the top of the podcast. There was movies like Armageddon and like that sort of thing. It wasn't like what it was up against, like typical blockbusters. And so I honestly couldn't say what they expected to get out of the Blade universe. But each three of these movies in this trilogy were like completely different movies to me. Like, I felt like the first one, they honestly were like, we're gonna ride the line between trying to be cinematic and like serious, and like have it be like a serious thing as much as you can be with, vampires exploding and stuff like that, and then being campy. Like they were zigging and zagging, dipping their toe on each end of the pool, and I mean, it didn't hurt the movie necessarily. I mean, the movie is what it is. It's a fun movie where a guy goes around and kills vampires, and that's pretty much what I wrote in my review, because I kept bouncing up back and forth between like, oh come on, that's bullshit. like I was watching with our friend Chris, and I kept pausing it, like I can't remember the things I was calling out, and eventually I realized like I have to stop doing this and picking this movie apart, because that's not what this movie is. Like, it's just a guy, he's just gonna like say some cool one-liners and he's just gonna kill some vampires, and it just falls into the category of like we talked about on the Man of Fire episode, is sometimes the point is to just like look cool, say cool shit, and do cool shit. And like, so they have this character that's a vampire and samurai ninja. I don't know what he is. He's got a sword. He's certainly got ninja aspects and, all this different martial arts stuff. And they've got a guy that can play it, Wesley Snipes. I think, Matt, you mentioned it. I didn't know this, but he was like an actual karate master, some sort of martial artist. I don't really know what his background is there, but they've got a guy that can do the moves. He can look cool and say cool stuff, and they just they leaned into it. And then when the second movie rolled around, I feel like they realized what worked best was not taking themselves too seriously. Let's just dive in on the camp and the silliness, and just like, let's just lean into how ridiculous this is, and stop trying to take ourselves so seriously. And for my money, the second one was the best one out of the trilogy because of that. Whereas the third one, I feel like, the franchise had some heat behind it. They obviously wanted to put some more people in it. They put, some higher, well, I can't say how high profile they were at the time, but, it's Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel and a few other people. And they really tried to lean into it and create like a weighted story and something to like actually chew on, which really hurt it, in my opinion. So to answer your question, I don't really know what it was trying to be, because was it trying to be just like a funny, silly thing? Were they trying to make it a franchise? Was Blade supposed to be a trilogy, or did it just do well enough and they realized what they could do with it? I really don't know, but I do think it's obviously super important, especially where comic book movies are now, especially on the R-rated side. You can see in Blade 3, they were really pushing the envelope there. There was a lot of F words, and there was like, they were starting to dig into where you could have like, you could tell compelling stories in an adult nature with these like silly characters. The movie, in my opinion, failed to do that. I still enjoyed it, but it started to lay the groundwork and show that can work. And so, for all of its faults, I feel like Blade's super important to a genre that's now taken over cinema. And, I think I'm glad it happened, and I'm glad we watched it, and it was a lot of fun. It's a good 3-star trilogy. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have fun. It's not going to win any awards, but that doesn't matter.
I feel like I agree with everything you're saying. I feel like the first Blade movie kind of took some like tonal stuff from the first Batman movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's like, let's make it dark, but then it was also just like, but also let's throw in rave culture. It's like, okay, cool, let's do that. Let's have a bloodbath rave, which is like hands down my favorite part of like all 3 of these movies. Like, it's the very first thing that we see in the first movie. Yeah, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I like wherever this is going, I'm on board. Yeah. I agree with you that I think the second one is the best, and I think a lot of that has to do with Guillermo del Toro, which you said, Matt, was like your reason that you chose Blade. That was like the final thing for you when we were like chatting, on the Slack, was like, oh, if he did this, then I want to watch it. And I think you could easily see how the next thing he did is he went to HELLBOY after this. And like, if anybody's seen HELLBOY, you kind of get those vibes, the beginning of it from Blade 2. And I think he perfected it in HELLBOY. I think HELLBOY is wonderful. Ron Perlman is great. It's good to see like his cast of characters in 2. And I'll just say, like, honestly, it's the worst movie of the 3, but I had the most fun watching Blade Trinity. Like, it was just like, it's not good. The dialogue is so rough. Like, it is hard. I think Blade says less than 100 lines because Snipes had issues with the director and writer.
We were in Vancouver, and Wesley Snipes was going crazy, and he wouldn't come out of his trailer, and you'd walk by his trailer, and this wall of pot stench would just like, whoa, and like kind of push you to the side. And then he would only answer to the name Blade. You couldn't call him.
He would only answer to Blade.
The Blade, yeah. And after a while, he resorted to just he would communicate with Post-its that he would give to the director, and each one he would sign Blade.
But I mean, it was fun to get a surprise like Parker Posey and Patton Oswalt and Natasha Lyonne. Like, it was fun to see those people along with Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel. So
I didn't know that Patton was in this, and I just know from listening to almost every word the man has said publicly, I know how much like comic books mean to him. And I guess I haven't listened to everything because I haven't heard the stuff he's talked about doing Blade, or I don't remember it. But I just remember when I saw him on screen, I was so happy for him. I was like, oh man, you got to be in the comic book movie, like the first one. Not the first one, but you know, like I was just so happy for him. It was really cool to see. And I didn't know Del Toro directed this until his name came up on the end credits. I think I had missed that in the Slack chat. And so when I saw that, it made total sense. But it was a nice little surprise.
Like you get the goggles that like close. I'm like, oh, that's kind of like Shape of Water stuff. Like you kind of like there's definitely those things that like if you know Del Toro,
like his character models,
the Pan's Labyrinth stuff, like all this, like all his stuff kind of like slides in together just perfectly. So yeah, I thought it was good, but yeah, I mean it's hard to go into that first Blade movie because all they have to go off of is like the Batmans, and obviously the Superman isn't the right tone for this. We hadn't seen the Matrix yet. We hadn't had X-Men yet. So they just kind of, I don't know, let's give this a shot. And I think that's maybe the best way to sum it up. It's just like, it's Batman in rave culture, you know? It's
for
just
sure.
like,
yeah, that's,
I don't know how else to explain it, but
it's not a bad tag for it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like when they were thinking of making this, there was like, at least the vibe I got from the first movie, and it kind of evolved over the trilogy. And probably why it did well enough to get a trilogy to begin with was I feel like they were flirting with that like teenage audience that had just turned 17 or like the 16 and 15-year-olds that were going with like their older siblings to R-rated movies. And I feel like that was like the sweet spot that they were going for.
Yeah. Just
because even the tone of like, it felt like it was trying hard to be a rated R movie, but not just to qualify, but not push the envelope on like what it means to be a rated R movie. And like that kind of shows the flaw in our rating system, because I feel like outside of like some really forced F words, like F words that are like the punchline of like some campy scene, the movie could have easily been, PG-13.
Yeah.
And so it's like that graduation into like R-rated movies, whereas like number 2 maybe pushed it a little further, and 3 kind of finally became like, okay, this is an R-rated movie.
Yeah, 3 kicked it off the edge there.
Let's get Van Wilder in here. And
do you think it's possible that after, because to me watching the second one, the first thing I thought was like, this is an obvious response to The Matrix. Like it's a few years after The Matrix, like a number of years, but there's just. I mean, it's too hard not to borrow from The Matrix when you're doing an action movie like this. But even though the first one was set in like rave culture, it was almost like they were trying to have like the same soundtrack. You know what I mean? Yeah. They would try like the end scene where they're fighting in the I can't remember, like they're in a club, I think, or I think it's a club, and just the way they show them running down hallways with the walls exploding next to them because of the bullets, and it's in slow motion. I felt like they had an IP that they thought would work with a lot of elements from The Matrix, and to me it did, And I just wonder if that's why it got made. They were like, Blade did well enough. The Matrix, revolutionized action movies. So why don't we try and take some of those elements and make it silly, And I think, to me, I think that might be why the second one happened. And then the third one happened just because of money, which, I'm not mad at. I had fun watching it. So
it's a business. Yeah. I think it's a good point. It was hard for any movie not to be influenced by The Matrix when that came out. So I think that totally makes sense. Matt, I know you want to talk about kind of what cluster this fits in with the superhero movies. And I just put that I think this also just fits in with the X-Men. It must have been somewhat of a response to that first movie. I think, honestly, like you said, this is basically a PG-13 movie with some really forced dialogue to make it R. Like you could get rid of some of the blood and stuff like that. That'd be fine. But this is basically a PG-13 movie. So I think this version of Blade could have easily crossed over in with the X-Men and just been there. I could see Hugh Jackman, Wesley Snipes, like in the scene together as their respective characters. And it doesn't seem out of place. Like, oh yeah, this is the same world. Like I totally get that. That makes sense. Spider-Man might have been, a little tougher with Tobey Maguire, that kind of stuff. But I just think, maybe it's just the dark suits. I don't know. But kind of the tone and everything I think you could bring down Blade to the PG-13 level and he'd fit in fine with that first X-Men run.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I wrote down, in addition to that, and this is the same era, I put that this fits nicely with the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie.
Yeah.
You know, you've got that training montage with Evanescence playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like anytime you start like into a montage of like training or whatever, and that heavy metal comes in.
You're in for a good time. Yeah, it's definitely that dark color palette that these movies have, where it's like, let's make it all like gritty and whatever. But, you know, also so many of these guys are from New York, you know, and like they do their stuff at night. So it kind of makes sense. It's probably also why my dumb brain was like, oh, it's like Batman because it's New York at night. So it's like, yeah, that's exactly like, that's when a lot of these guys thrive. So it kind of makes sense that all of them could just like hang out together.
Also, I kind of liked, this is sort of non sequitur. I liked that each movie was like a different version of the vampires. Like first it's just like vampires, and then the second movie is like zombie vampires, and then the third one we have a mummy vampire. Like I really liked how they kind of combined the different horror classics into one character. I thought that was kind of cool too.
Definitely.
I don't know where we're supposed to go with that comment, but
I think it was great. And one thing I also wanted to say was that I think it's awesome that they gave their first real comic book movie to a person of color. I think that was a pretty bold move for back then, unfortunately, you know, like, but it was just like, oh, that's cool that they did this. Like, I'm somewhat surprised they didn't whitewash the role and just give it to someone else. You know what I mean? Like, here's Sly Stallone as Blade.
Steven Seagal.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. Steven Seagal's like filmed this exact movie before.
He's just done this at his own compound.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to do Blade, but I'll do it by myself. Like,
it's like that. It's like that vault that Prince supposedly has of a bunch of movies he produced that never came out. I don't know if you guys have heard that Kevin Smith story, but Steven Seagal just has a vault of all the comic book action movies that he put himself
star in. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And so I'd put this movie with Daredevil. I'd pair it with Ghost Rider. I'd put it with the Punisher movie, which is another one that was kind of like figuring out the rated R superhero movie. And probably did it better because I think it knew just to take itself a more like rougher and more serious. So yeah, that's the cluster I would fit in. Felt like there was something that you said, Ben, that I was going to talk about.
Ben says lots of cool stuff. Don't talk about my friend that way, Ben.
Oh, well, I think it was interesting. Oh, it was what Tyler said, like the different type of vampires. Well, it was funny to see how different the three movies were. Like Tyler, you mentioned the first movie kind of had an identity crisis. Like 1 minute you have this rave scene with blood spouting from the ceiling.
Yeah.
And the very next scene, you're having these campy moments where like Wesley Snipes is like celebrating his own kills. Like, he's like fist pumping. Was like, yes.
Just and the like, Tiger Woods, like, oh yes.
Yeah, and then we're supposed to attach emotionally to the story with his mom and stuff. It's like, what are we supposed to be doing here? Like, can we just kill some vampires?
And then he has like this cool scene where he fights, Deacon Frost, and then he catches his glasses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I think Angie talked a lot about it in her reviews, and I felt like the catching the glasses moment is like the perfect representation of what Blade is supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna do it, go all the way. Go all the way. Like Angie said, like she would rather have had the glasses land on his face. Like just go directly onto his face. I was disappointed to see it not happen in the third movie. I was waiting for it. It's like, when is he gonna catch his glasses and put them on? The first movie, didn't know what it was. Tyler, you mentioned the second movie, maybe recognized that the campiness was the way to go. I agree with you guys. I think Guillermo del Toro kind of had a better visual understanding of. He's just a great storyteller, and
he knows how to work in a weird world. He knows how to work in a world that doesn't make sense. He knows how to make it translate and make sense. And keep the thread there. Like he knows how to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and so I feel like the second movie had the most success to me because it felt like it knew what it was the most, and it knew what it was trying to be the most.
Right.
It was the most confident of the three, I think. And then Trinity, I'm trying to figure out like where a lot of these creative decisions, like all of a sudden they needed a comic relief, so they bring in Ryan Reynolds, which we didn't have in the other two movies. I mean, the closest thing to comic relief that we had in the previous two movies was the Boots guy, Whistler, like, and his just like bad attitude, you know?
Yeah, like I would say the closest thing to comic relief we had in the first two movies was just the first two movies. You know, like I just found myself laughing at some of the stuff that happened. And in the second movie, it was like less of a laughing at it. You know what I mean? I mean, you're always laughing at it, but it was more like I was on board with it. I was like, okay, like...
I think it's the confidence. Like this knows what it is, and it's not an imposter of something. And I do have to say, mentioning Whistler, if he had two really like awesome scenes in the first two movies where he's like kicking and punching and stuff, like how cool would it have been if these boots were made for walking song played while he was
that would have been pretty cool.
Pretty good.
Oh man.
I think they probably spent all their money on the CGI. They couldn't afford the songs.
Yeah, that was in the original script. Like, we need to play this song. But yeah, the third movie, Ryan Reynolds is there, which for those who haven't seen Blade Trinity, like this might as well have been his audition for Deadpool, because it was basically a rough draft of Deadpool. Which it felt weird. It also felt weird to have him narrate the movie because you've never met him before.
Yeah, I thought that was super weird. I still don't understand why. And it might have been just like they just needed something. They're just like, Ryan, you have to record this. Maybe like Ben, you said that Snipes had problems with the director. Maybe he was supposed to do it and he refused. So they're like, I guess Ryan will do it.
And I know him, like Snipes and Kris Kristofferson did not like that they were adding in all these people because they thought it was like taking attention away from the true core, like just the two of them. And I totally understand that. And that's why.
And it did too.
It didn't really work, I don't think. Like, it's the most fun to watch for me just because of the train wreck aspect of it, you know, and how bad some of the stuff is. But yeah, unfortunately, you know, I'm glad Del Toro went on to do Hellboy, but it would have been interesting to see him take on the Trinity and see how he would have finished this off.
Yeah, totally.
Speaking of new characters, we haven't mentioned him at all, but I really enjoyed seeing young Norman Reedus in the second one. I thought he was a really cool addition and a good way to you know, replace Whistler momentarily, because he's like the younger, like more brash, like confident, cocky young guy, and I thought he was really cool in that role. I really enjoyed him a lot in the second one.
I thought he was great, and when he came on screen, my first thought was like, that guy found a haircut that works, and he's staying with it. Like,
for sure.
He knows what works for him, and he's just going to stay true to that. So
he's looked 50 since he was 20.
Is this like, did Walking Dead come on? Like, what's going on right now?
Yeah. So I guess we can just move on to our favorite parts of the trilogy. I have a few written down, but Ben, if you want to kick us off on some of the things that were standouts to you.
One I already mentioned really was just that opening rave scene. Like, I think it really set the tone for that first movie as kind of what we were, you know, getting into for the next 2 hours. Visually, it was awesome. You know, the fight scene that takes place after that, like that was the best part of all three movies. And the only other thing I wrote down is like, I enjoyed the one-liners. Like, I thought they gave a little bit of levity to the character.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
But you guys already talked about, like, you know, trying to find the right balance versus the yes, got him, you know, kind of fist bump versus just like this real dramatic story. But I'm always in the mood for a good one-liner, you know, talking about, you know, some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill. You know, it's like, yeah, I guess you would say that. I don't know why, but like,
yeah, like I still don't totally know what that means. Like,
yeah,
I think I get it.
Skate uphill. Like, I don't know that you can't do that, but the one that I liked the most, though, for some reason, was when Whistler hands him that big UV light thing.
Still heavy, but you're so big.
And that was it. I was like, yeah, that's like, yeah, don't complain about this. You're super buff. You're like a vampire. You can carry this. I don't know why, but that one really got me. He's like, you're so big. Yeah, I don't know. It really was that. Like, I like some of the visual, stuff like the rave, and then the one-liners at least kind of kept me interested, in the movies.
For sure. Yeah, when I was trying to think of my favorite parts, it's weird because I didn't watch these movies that long ago. But I don't really remember anything about them, to be quite honest. Because to me, none of it mattered. Because the only thing I cared about was Blade fighting vampires. I genuinely probably could have watched. I think each movie was a half an hour too long, so I think I could have watched 70 minutes each movie of Blade fighting, just like fighting the vampires. So for me, my favorite part of the trilogy, and I realized this watching the third one, I felt like it was a really smart decision to make the vampires explode when they die. Like, rather than just like shrivel up and kind of like disintegrate, like the fact that they explode is like very satisfying, right? Like each time he kills a vampire, it's like boom,
it's like popping a zit.
Yeah, it's like it's like satisfying, So to me, that's my favorite part, just the decision of how the vampires die and just watching Blade go through them. I did think it was, not like we're gonna nitpick the third movie, like why even nitpick it because it's so silly. But I thought it was weird that we watch him just mow through like superhuman creatures and the strongest, demons in the universe. And then in the third movie, he just like surrenders to like 10 cops.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, not that I was buying into the third movie, but I was just like,
and also how devastated he was about it. Like, all is ruined.
yeah, it's like,
he lost.
What are you doing?
It's over.
Your whole life has been a nightmare. Like, this is all you do is fight things, and like, and you've literally never lost a fight in your life, and now like 10 cops with like flak jackets and you're just gonna surrender. I thought it was so weird. But yeah, just all the fighting and just the way the vampires explode is my favorite part.
Awesome. So I guess going through a couple starting from the movie, I like the rave scene a lot. I really loved how that the doctor at the beginning has that boyfriend that's like, why are we together? And then he shows up later in a zombie form. I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah.
And thrown in there too. Like I don't know. It was interesting that they didn't bring her back to complete the trilogy. Oh, that was an interesting decision because they kind of built her up to be, part of the team. And then she just wasn't. And then Norman Reedus, I mentioned in my Letterboxd review, I love him having this bomb. Like, I liked the twist. And then he's like, oh, great. And then it explodes, which was hilarious. It was also like, it wasn't that like, I wasn't expecting that twist, but it was also kind of like an eye roll twist. Like, of course. Like, I should have seen this coming.
Sure. But you wouldn't have seen the double twist coming.
Yeah.
I actually my eye roll was the double twist. I'm like, oh, sure. Like, like
the bomb doesn't work. Yes, it does work. Oh, great. Yeah. That was hilarious. I liked in the third movie, the rest of these are from the third movie. I like in the final showdown with Dracula, when he's like, Blade says something and he finishes like, mother effer. And then Dracula's like,
Motherfucker. I like that.
Yeah. Very silly. Oh, speaking of people saying dumb shit, how awful was Triple H in this on a scale of 0 to 0? Because you don't have another option, in my opinion. He's so bad. And it's crazy because, like, these professional wrestlers are performers. I guess they're used to performing bigger and more like, melodramatic, I guess. But he was truly awful. And I was looking at his IMDb. He's not in anything else, and I can see why. He was so bad.
Yeah, we've kind of been pampered with some great talent out of WWE and Dave Bautista and The Rock.
For sure.
And John Cena even, does better than Triple H.
Even Stone Cold was like, I mean, he just played Stone Cold, but in that in the remake of the Longest Yard. He was good in that, you know. Like,
oh yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. I know, like in the '80s, we had that golden era with Hulk Hogan and like 10 different things.
Suburban Commando.
Yeah.
It's interesting reading here in the trivia about Triple H because it said that he impressed the producers with his work ethic and camera presence. So New Line insisted that extra lines be written to make his role bigger.
Oh,
and I was like, I don't think camera presence and work ethic really is the same as acting. Like, yeah, maybe he was on set every day and maybe he looks great on camera, but that doesn't mean you need to give this guy any more lines. I mean,
give him more screen time. Like, just make him like a Terminator. He says one or two things. Maybe he could be a mute. He could be a guy that just grunts a lot. Like,
yeah, make him like Deadpool and Wolverine.
Sure.
Origins.
Yeah.
Just like sew his mouth shut. Like, yeah, you're tough, but
yeah, I mean, even like Waterboy had who was Captain Insano?
Oh yeah,
Big
I
Show.
know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's like the guys who can't carry, something, like just give them a role like that where they're in their comfort zone. They can just kind of be themselves, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I loved Ryan Reynolds after he's like walking backwards and trips and falls down down in the window. I don't know. It was so funny to me. And then the last, probably my favorite part of the trilogy is he's in he's been arrested. He's in like the questioning room. They're like, so how many have you killed? 40, 50? He's like 1,580.
Yeah.
Which
the
like,
exact number.
I honestly felt was kind of low.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like
1,581.
I guess if he's only talking about humans directly, then maybe that's right. But it's like, I feel like
it's like you killed 1,000 in Blade 1.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is like, I feel like I watched you kill that many just in the first movie. But,
yeah, 1,581. It's like, how is he keeping track anyways?
I love it.
But yeah,
Steel Trap, man.
Those are my favorite parts. I guess before we wrap up and go towards the Rushmores, I have to ask, since this is going to be a hot debate, I think over the next few months as we go over like Captain America and Tony Stark and who was right and wrong in the Civil War. And even though this didn't exist in the MCU, what side do you think Blade would have been on in the MCU Civil War, Ben?
Because you made us choose a side, because I, at my heart, just feel like he would have stayed out of this.
Yeah.
I
This
went
is stupid.
the opposite to what I thought I would do personally, and I think he would go with Tony, because I think he would also either hope for or expect that maybe along with any enhanced humans that might also be vampires, like if there's any way to start tracking these people. And that would make his job so much easier to hunt down vampires and kill them all. So I think he might push for it, but with the objective of his own personal gain, not as much as I think the government should, have their say in this. It's just no, just give me a list of everybody because I want to go take care of all of them. So that's why I went with Iron Man.
Fair enough. Now, we might have to cut this out, and this is going to be something we can add to the long string of things that we can't tell Palcher. I don't want him to be disappointed in me. But what was each side arguing for? I can't remember. Which one wanted to follow the rules and which one didn't? I can never remember.
Tony wanted to fall in with the government that all the superheroes should, basically be registered and just weapons of mass destruction ready to go whenever. Cap was just that takes away the freedoms of everyone. So
yeah.
Right? I mean, Matt, you might be able to describe it better, but that's Reader's Digest version.
I always get confused because he's Captain America, so you would think he'd side with the government, but I guess that's our American spirit, is we don't side with anyone. So yeah, I guess I'd have to agree. I would say he would go with Iron Man just because his whole thing is protecting humans, right? And so that's what the Accords are supposed to do, is truly protect humans, and I think he probably would have gone that direction. And he pretty much follows the lead, what Whistler says goes. You know what I mean? He seems like he doesn't seem to be an independent necessarily. You know what I mean? Like, he has a code and he has a direction, and I think Iron Man probably would have provided that best to him. So I'll go with Iron Man.
Okay. So it's funny that you said Iron Man, Ben, and gave that reason, because that was actually my first train of thought was this makes the most sense. And it does make sense. But I actually ended up choosing Cap for the reason being that the way that the government was hoping to get involved in that, like with Tony and almost kind of Tony's approach, I almost feel like would have been so off-putting to Blade from like a vampire standpoint, where he's fighting these guys who are like tagging themselves. Like throughout the trilogy, he's like seeing the tags of these vampires, like humans that belong to vampires. And I almost feel like Cap would recruit him to fight these registered superheroes. And yeah, like not have his fight be impeded by government intervention. Like, he wants to fight these vampires without registering. But I could see the argument going either way, and I'm glad that we disagreed on this so that we can get the community in on it.
Yeah.
Do we think there's a chance at any point, like with, you know, Doctor Strange being able to weave together universes, that we see a glimpse of the Blade universe in Marvel, you know, in the overall Marvel Cinematic Universe? I mean, I know they're making a new Blade movie, and I don't know how it's going to tie in, but I'm curious, like, what are the odds that, you know, one of the Avengers or whatever pops into wherever it is Blade lives?
I think it'd be interesting. I mean, with all the rumors going around this Spider-Man 3, you know, with, you know, Toby being there and Andrew Garfield and stuff, like, I think we're definitely obviously getting into the multiverse here, and it wouldn't surprise me if, you know, Snipes shows up for a little bit, you know, just like a little cameo or something in one of these MCU movies.
I think it deserves it. You know what I mean? Like, I really do think that without Blade, it would have been more difficult to kick off some of these other movies, because Blade was an overlooked IP that, you know, became a thing and sort of proved that, you know, these stories do belong on screen, you know, and there's a world of people out there that want to see it. So, yeah. And like you said, you know, he was one of the first, you know, major comic book characters on screen played by a person of color. So I genuinely think it deserves to have some love in the overall universe now. So I think it'd be really cool, but we'll see.
I wonder if they do a stinger similar to the Wonder Woman 1984, you know, just like kind of show it, but not much. I'd like to give him some more screen time than just like an end of credits scene, but, you know, we got Howard the Duck and the end of Guardians, so like, at least give us Wesley Snipes, you know, like, give us Blade. So, yeah.
Does Blade age? Like, he definitely starts to look old in the third one. He's moving a little bit more robotically, but like, does he actually age? He's half vampire.
I think just like super slow.
Yeah.
Is that right, Matt?
I think so.
He's not necessarily immortal, but I think that's part of the stuff that Whistler's giving him or whatever kind of keeps him.
Gotcha.
But I don't know for sure. But Wesley Snipes doesn't age, so that doesn't matter.
Speaking of things Whistler gives him, I meant to prepare for this, and I wish I would have. I wanted to do a surprise Rushmore on you guys. The surprise Rushmore of best uses of an inhaler on screen, because being an asthmatic for my entire life, anytime I see use of an inhaler on screen, I feel represented. And so this is probably by far the coolest. I mean, we have the guy in Little Giants uses an inhaler, and I know there's other ones. I wish I would have researched this a little bit.
The bad guy in Casino Royale.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember that.
That's a really good one. Doesn't Michael Cera use one in Juno?
Yeah.
I think, not that it's cool, but like, I'm just trying to think of other times that I've seen that. Yeah.
I wish I would have prepared. Oh, well. Maybe I'll look it up real quick.
But speaking of Rushmore, I think now's a great time to jump into the Rushmore of tonight, which is top 4 non-MCU Marvel movies.
These are OR scrubs.
Oh, are they?
So these are movies that were not created by Marvel Studios and do not exist in that universe that they've created over the last 10 years.
But are Marvel IP, comic IP.
Correct.
Cool.
So this would include Blade, this would include Daredevil and Fantastic Four, which were Fox, and X-Men, which was Fox, and the earlier Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, and then The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, which were Sony properties.
And the Eric Bana Hulk.
And the Eric Bana Hulk, yeah, that was Universal.
Word.
Yeah.
And Ghost Rider, Fox, again.
Mm-hmm.
I forget that was a Marvel thing.
Old Nick Cage.
Yeah. Kick-Ass, I guess, would fit on there as well. That's a Marvel IP.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is, huh?
I'll go first, and then I guess whichever you two wants to go next can jump in.
Let's do it.
So my first pick, and there's probably going to be some overlap here because I feel like these movies are kind of top heavy with how good they are. But first one's Spider-Man 2.
I want you to find your friend, Spider-Man. Tell him to meet me at the West Side Tower at 3 o'clock.
Well, I don't know where he is.
Find him. Or I'll peel the flesh off her bones.
If you lay one finger on her...
You'll do what?
It's no secret to anyone who's listened to this. When we talk about superheroes, Spider-Man 2 is probably my favorite superhero movie of all time. I love it. And so that's taken number 1. Number 2, X-Men Days of Future Past. Number 3,
nice.
The original Spider-Man.
Who is Spider-Man? He's a criminal, that's who he is. A vigilante, a public menace. What's he doing on my front page?
Mr. Jameson, is a page 6 problem.
We have a page 1 problem, shut up.
The first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. And then 4, finishing off with X2.
I like it.
Very cool. You
2 Spideys,
took...
2 X-Men.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, you took a couple of mine. I thought you were going to step on all of them, but for me, I'd have to put Deadpool at the top of that.
Oh, hello. I know, right? Whose balls did I have to fondle to get my very own movie? I can't tell you, but it does rhyme with Pulverine. And let me tell you, he's got a nice pair of smooth criminals down under.
I don't really know what else I can say about Deadpool. But yeah, so anyways, I put Deadpool at the top. I also had Days of Future Past on there. I also had Spider-Man 2. And then I also had the other Spider-Man 2, The Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield. Well, I guess that's the first one, right? Whatever the first one is.
Knock, knock. Mr. Criminal. Hey, my name is Spider-Man. You can call me Webhead. You can call me Amazing. Just don't call me late for dinner. You get it?
The first one with Andrew Garfield.
Like the one with Electro with Jamie Foxx, or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I really loved that version of Spider-Man. I was really sad that it didn't have more legs than it did. It might not be perfect, but I was never a huge comic book person, and I just really liked that movie. So, yeah. So, yeah, Deadpool, Days of Future Past, Spider-Man 2, and then Spider-Man 2, the first one. The second Spider-Man, the first one.
I like it. Yeah, got some crossover here. Obviously, I'm with you, Matt. Spider-Man 2 would be my Rushmore for just comic book movies in general. Like, I love it. Sam Raimi, Doc Ock, like, yeah, it's arguable. It's a perfect movie in my mind. X-Men 2. The opening scene with Nightcrawler, like, talk about setting the tone. Like, it's just like, holy shit, this is awesome. This is so cool. I love this. I also have Deadpool on mine just because I think it was a great twist on the comic book movie genre, and we kind of got to see Deadpool, the character, on screen, breaking the fourth wall like he does in the comic books. And Ryan Reynolds was just, I mean, talk about people that are born to play a certain role. Like, he fits perfectly. Like, it's when you leak your own test footage so the movie will get made. It's like, this is great.
You just took everything I was trying to say but got tongue tied on. I just feel like it's like the perfect representation of the source material. You know what I mean? Like, it really is, to me, like the comic book on screen, which I think is really cool. So
you would think that they based the comic book off of him.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, he's
Seriously.
perfect for it. But sorry, I stepped on your.
No, you're fine. Honestly, like Days of Future Past, that's a really good choice. I mean, I love that movie. It's so good. But I ended mine with someone else who I think was kind of born to play the role, and that was Logan.
Laura. No. Move.
I thought that was, I mean, talk about like ending a character perfectly.
Oh, spoiler alert! I still haven't seen it.
What do you mean?
I still haven't seen it.
Listen,
I'm kidding.
at the
I don't
bumper
care.
at the beginning, we spoil all the movies here, but
That's right.
And also like Wolverine never dies. So, no, I mean, just like Hugh Jackman, he's, I don't know. It's so, now I'm tongue tied. I don't know what to say. It's wonderful. There's so many scenes in this movie where like Professor X is slowing like everybody down around him, and like Wolverine, I don't know. Fuzz, you need to watch this. Please watch this movie.
I know.
It's so good. So yeah, Logan would end mine. So Spider-Man 2, The Raimi Spider-Man, X-Men 2, Deadpool, and Logan.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Love it.
Those are great picks. We had a lot of fun watching Blade. I already knew I was going to have a good time watching it, but I still underestimated how good of a time I had watching this trilogy.
Yeah.
I recommend it. I know that, yeah, like Tyler said, we kind of didn't have great things to say about it, but all that said, like, that's also kind of what made it enjoyable at the same time, was
right.
Just, if you want to see a movie that's all 1998, watch Blade. There's also a ton of good movies that came out in 1998, so watch Blade and a bunch of others. But yeah, we had a great time with it. Trilogies has been fun. Please go on our Patreon and become a patron. Check out our shop. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe to us on YouTube. You know what to do. We love doing this, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and before we let you go, it would really help us out if you're enjoying this to let us know on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review.
Yes.
It's not only selfishly to help us, be exposed to new people. We genuinely want to know what you like or don't like, or what you enjoy about what we're doing. We're not trying to just put something out into a void. We want to hear from everyone. So whether it's on Instagram or on Apple Podcasts or YouTube comments, wherever, we just want to hear from you guys and interact with you guys. And we really appreciate all the support and everyone that's listened so far.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun just growing this community. Trilogies has been a lot of fun too. If you want to be ready for our next episode, we're going to be talking about the Before trilogy, the Richard Linklater trilogy. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to watch those, and I know they're super popular, like really well made movies. So I'm excited to check those out. So if you want to join us for the next watch, we'll be going over the Before trilogy.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time. We'll see you later.
See ya.
You're still here. It's over. Go home. Oh, you're expecting a teaser for Deadpool 2. Well, we don't have that kind of money. Are you expecting Sam Jackson show up with an eye patch and a saucy little leather number? Go.